They called him crazy. They said he was bitter, stubborn, holding on to something that had already slipped through time's fingers. But Ronald Easton didn't see it that way. To him, that patch of land on the edge of the county wasn't just dirt and wood. It was blood, memory, and promise. His father, Ernest Easton, had carved life out of that soil with bare hands and aching bones, and every inch of it still spoke his name. Ronald grew old listening to the wind move through the oak trees his father planted, and he swore he'd never leave, no matter how much the world changed around him. Then one morning, a white envelope changed everything. It was official, neat, printed with the developer's logo, Rowan Development Group. Inside was a letter claiming the land no longer belonged to Ronald. The company had purchased it legally, they said, and construction was scheduled to begin within the month. Attached was a scanned document bearing a signature, his father's signature, Ernest Easton's name, written in tidy cursive, signing away the home he'd fought so hard to build. Ronald stared at that page for a long time. His father could barely sign his own name. He'd practice it like a prayer. Simple, rough, shaky letters, never perfect, but always his own. That signature on the paper was too clean, too confident, too false. He called the number printed at the bottom. No one answered. He left messages. Days passed, then weeks. When they finally did come, it wasn't with apologies or explanations. It was with suits, sunglasses, and bright white trucks that gleamed like arrogance. Clarence, the site manager, walked across the field with his clipboard, pretending to be polite. Mr. Easton, you'll have to vacate. We have authorization to begin the foundation next week. Ronald leaned on his cane, eyes steady. This land remembers who built it, he said quietly. Do you? Clarence shifted, uncomfortable, then walked away. The next week, bulldozers arrived at dawn. Ronald stood in front of them, a single figure against the rising dust. They threatened him with trespassing charges. He didn't move. They called the sheriff. He still didn't move. Soon enough, papers arrived from court. Rowan Development Group versus Ronald Easton. Trespassing, obstruction, refusal to vacate private property. The irony cut deeper than the insult. The land his father bought with a lifetime's worth of sweat and broken bones was now the ground he was accused of invading. He needed a lawyer, but none wanted the case. Until Angela Poole came along, a young attorney who'd grown up nearby, raised by a single mother who used to buy vegetables from Ernest Easton's garden. She remembered the stories, the generosity, the quiet dignity. She said she'd take the case pro bono. They sat together in the dim kitchen, going through old documents. Ronald pulled out a shoebox full of yellowed papers, receipts, tax slips, faded photographs, letters his father kept. They searched for the original title deed, but found only fragments. The county office claimed it was lost in a flood decades ago. Without proof, the developer's forged documents looked legitimate. The trial moved fast. Jeanette Rowan, the CEO, sat at the plaintiff's table, composed and confident. She smiled at Ronald like a teacher indulging a stubborn child. Her lawyer spoke about progress, urban renewal, and maximizing community value. Ronald said nothing. He just held a black and white photograph of his father standing beside a tractor, the same oak tree visible behind him. When his turn came to speak, his voice trembled but never wavered. "My father couldn't write that clean," he said, holding up the forged signature. "And he sure as hell wouldn't sell the land he was buried under." The courtroom fell quiet, but the law cared little for sentiment. They needed proof. Without it, truth was just a story. Angela refused to give up. She spent sleepless nights digging through archives, chasing leads, calling retired clerks. One evening, buried in an old microfilm drawer, she found it, a 1972 notarized title transfer, still sealed in the county's official stamp. Ernest Easton's signature was there, rough and familiar, but instead of transferring ownership, it confirmed permanent retention. He'd refused a partnership buyout from Jeanette Rowan's father and declared the land non-transferable within his lifetime and his heirs. Angela printed copies, trembling with excitement. When she presented them in court, even the judge went silent. Jeanette's face drained of color. Clarence looked down at his shoes. The fraud was undeniable. Her father had forged a sale decades earlier to quietly shift ownership when Ernest died, hiding the truth under paperwork no one thought to question. The verdict came swiftly. The court restored full ownership to Ronald Easton. Damages were awarded, though he didn't care about the money. All he wanted was his father's name cleared and his land left untouched. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, but Ronald didn't speak to them. He just stood for a moment, breathing the cool air. Angela placed the original title in his hands. He traced his father's uneven signature with a trembling finger. He never sold it, he whispered. He just trusted the wrong people. Weeks later, the trucks were gone. The signs were pulled down. The field was quiet again. Ronald sat on his porch, watching the sunlight pour through the oak leaves. The land looked tired, but alive, like it had been holding its breath for too long. Angela visited sometimes, bringing groceries or just sitting in silence. One evening, she found him standing near the old family gravesite. He cleaned the stones, cleared the weeds. "You did it," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "No," he said. "We just reminded them it was never theirs to take." He knelt by his father's headstone, brushing away the dust. "They almost took it, Papa," he murmured. "But I held on." Then he placed the court document beside the grave, the paper fluttering in the wind like a final truth set free. That night, he sat alone under the oak tree as the sky turned to fire. The land hummed with memory. The echo of hammers, the rhythm of footsteps, the laughter of men long gone. He closed his eyes and let it wash over him. For the first time in years, he felt peace. In the distance, thunder rolled, promising rain. He knew the soil would drink it like forgiveness. He knew the roots would hold, just as he had. And when dawn came, the world would move on, just as it always did. But this time, it would move on with his father's name still written in the earth. They called him crazy. They called him bitter. But in the end, Ronald Easton was neither. He was simply a man who refused to let time or power erase what was rightfully his. Justice hadn't roared for him. It had whispered, quiet and steady, like the wind through the oak leaves. And that whisper was enough.